Welcome everybody this evening. I see there's quite a few of you online. My name is Danielle DeVries. I'm the planner for the Electoral Area E OCP Update project. Tonight our meeting is twofold in purpose. We will be overviewing where we're at in the process of the OCP and up to date on where we are with the community survey, and then opening the floor to your questions and comments and spending the majority time on that. So I will share my screen with you here and we'll get going. So also tonight in attendance, we have Director Kozakovich here, the Electoral Area E Director, and also Michael Bryden, who is the consultant for the survey from Local Decisions. And then I also have Shannon Duong with me, who is another planner at the RDOS. Just a little update for you on what a public information meeting is. It's generally informal. We're not taking minutes. However, we are recording this, so it is available after the fact. This is more specific to something that's going directly to board, as this is an ongoing project. So we are taking questions and comments, but the time is not of the essence as it normally would be with a board application. We will be opening this with a presentation from myself and from Michael Bryden, but when we get to the question period, you are welcome to raise your hand to show that you would like to speak. So in the bottom right-hand corner, there is a participants button, and once you click that, you'll see the list of everybody there. You'll be under the attendees, and you'll be able to click the little hand to show that you would like to raise your hand. If that should work. If you're on the phone, you use *3 to go through, and that will raise the hand for you, and we'll be able to unmute you. This meeting is set up as a webinar, so you can't unmute yourself. We will unmute you and invite you to speak, and then mute you again once you're done. And as long as you use the raise hand function, we'll be able to catch you. So short overview of tonight, I'm going to update you on where we are in the OCP process, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page for what we're doing with that. Then I'll go over the survey process and what we're doing with the Community Vision Survey. Michael Bryden will share with you the quantitative results, so the numbers and how things turned out after survey 2, and then I'll go through the qualitative results, which are your comments and some of the FAQs I've noticed there. Then we'll go straight to questions, which again will be the majority of tonight's meeting. Just to get you grounded here, we are talking about the Electoral Area E OCP. So Electoral Area E is everything that's outlined in the thick dark gray line here on the east side of the lake. Summerland is its own entity. Everything from Okanagan Mountain Provincial Park down to the border with the city of Penticton, with the village of Naramata right in the middle on the lake. The OCP process is the official community plan. We go through these about every 10 to 15 years to update the plan and make sure that it reflects what the community would like to see, and is directing the future for your community for the next 20 to 25 years. These are long-term, so we need to think quite far ahead and make sure we're protecting lands that need to be protected and designating things that might be for growth. These are regulated by the Local Government Act, so we're mandated to do them for your community and make sure that they're up to date and following the regulations that we have. And they're really important to guide the planning processes for your community. The regional growth strategy is the big plan that says where the growth areas are. Then the OCP says the specifics for your community, what's going to happen in Electoral Area E. And the zoning bylaw is what actions that and creates the rules and restrictions for what can happen on a property. And everything else happens from there. It's infrastructure, servicing, building permits, etc. So it's really important that this plan sets the framework. This is the general timeline of where we're going in this project. So we started in the fall doing background work, gathering together a group for the community advisory. So people that represent your community and are helping us with this plan. We started with some background research and documents that we're just finalizing now and will be released soon. We've since, in the new year, moved into this visioning phase, which you've been involved in with Survey 1 and now Survey 2. There's 3 surveys altogether, and that will form the community engagement of this community vision phase. And what we're really trying to get at here is a high-level direction for where the detailed work is going to go. We're just towards the end of it here in this green star. We have one more phase, or one more round of the survey to go, and then we'll move into the next phase, which is drafting the plan and actually getting into some policy changes. There will be more engagement there to make sure we're getting the changes, if any, correct. And then the final phase is the more formal process where we work the plan through referrals with our community agencies and the board itself to get approval. A lot of you are very visual, so this is pretty much the same thing, but in a calendar format, just showing the phases that we're going through that involve the public. So the community advisory group is made up of members of your community. Been meeting since November, and we'll meet throughout this process until we have a draft OCP that's ready to go forward for approvals. We're in the middle of this community vision survey. It's almost done. At the same time, we've started doing some deep dive meetings with the community advisory group that are saying, you know, here's the really important things we're hearing from the community. Let's learn a bit more about it to make sure that when we get into this policy development phase, we are saying the correct things and speaking the same language, because some of this is quite technical. And then once those 2 are complete, we'll be completely into policy development, working on any changes that might happen to your OCP, doing engagement with you on those changes to make sure they're heading the right direction, and finally into the fall and new year, working through that formal process. Just wanted to touch a little bit more on the role of the community advisory group. These are people who represent a variety of people from your community. We selected them based on asking key groups for somebody to represent them, as well as an open invitation through My Naramata and an information release of people who are interested in joining the group. So we've tried to have a variety of ages, interests, property owning or not, sizes of properties, types of properties, what they'd like to see happen in the community, so that we have quite a few different voices on that panel. This group was providing input to me and to Director Kazakovich on a smaller scale, because it's easier to listen to about 25 people and have really deep conversations. And then they're supporting the best ways to reach out to you as the greater community to make sure that we're hearing from everybody as well, not just them. And then last part of this section, I just want to touch on where you can find all of this information, because I get these questions a lot. We have a regional connections page. The link is at the bottom here, rdosregionalconnections.ca/area EOCP. And when you go to that page and scroll down, it looks exactly like this. The newest, most important thing is right at the top. So tonight's public information meeting is what's there now. Next week, it'll change to say, hey, sign up and participate in the round 3 survey, because that's the most important action for you as the community. Then right under that, I have the key links, which are things that you're looking for. These are summaries of the surveys, what your community members are saying, video recordings from this meeting and other meetings that have happened that I know you're all looking for. And then the sidebar is quite important. You can get updates, our contact information. If you keep scrolling down the sidebar, it's got the key dates of what's coming up, the total phases of the plan, and the documents. So this is another location, if you scroll down and look in that sidebar, where I've placed almost everything that we're working on so that it's public and available and you can read and follow along. And then finally, at the very bottom of the page is a spot to ask questions. So if you don't get a chance to ask your question tonight, or if you're nervous to have it, your voice on camera, because this is recorded, you can submit it here or to me via email, and it will get answered. So if you submit it here, it's answered publicly, and you can see there's categories of what people have been asking and how it's been answered below, and I make sure that all of those are available to you. Right, and then the last updates that are coming onto that website soon are a fact sheet on vacation rentals, because it's quite important right now to the community, just making sure that we have the right information out there on how the process currently works, be it that it's the best way or not. This is the way we're using. The video of this meeting and the other deep dive meetings will be up there soon. I'm also doing Q&A sheets in a written format from everything that's getting asked at meetings but not able to be addressed on a video. Survey 3 will be launching very soon, and then the background reports I mentioned at the beginning are almost done and will be uploaded soon. That's it for the overview of the OCP. I'm going to switch gears to the survey itself and then let Michael Bryden speak to you as well. So just to recap, it's a 3-round survey. We've already done rounds 1 and 2. The first round asked you about your likes and dislikes, where we were really trying to get at what matters about Naramata and what are people passionate about. That'll come back again and again, because they're very important things. But we use those first to create these stylized scenarios that you saw in round 2. Now in round 3, we'll show you those scenarios again, but with your community's input, so that you can see what your neighbors are saying about why they like and don't like certain scenarios. And that is kind of the deciding round. I'll let Michael touch on that further. Just also recapping what we've done, the round 1 survey asked about your likes and dislikes. We've categorized them into 110 categories for likes and 132 categories for dislikes. This survey was not quantitative. It wasn't a numbers game about who liked what the most. We were just trying to get an overview of what matters in Naramata. So we have this summary here, which is linked on the Regional Connections page that has it short and simple. And we also have the full summary if you want to read every single comment that's underneath what we categorized as community spirit. It's all there. It's 174 pages of your comments and your words, directly copy paste. Nothing's been edited. These were used as well to help form the hot topic. So between what we're hearing from the CAG, which is the Community Advisory Group, and in that round 1 survey of likes and dislikes, we've used that to move forward with our deep dives and things we're talking about further in the advisory group, because they seem to be really important topics. These are some examples of them. It's not exhaustive, but just to give you an idea that we are hearing that these are very important and moving forward with them. And lastly, I just want to reiterate that survey 2, the way you saw the scenarios, they were stylized. So I'll touch on it again later, but each of the 5 scenarios you saw represent a bit of an extreme and aren't meant to be completely realistic, but it's presented that way to get to some point in the middle. So anywhere between the scenarios is likely where reality lies for the community, but we wanted to ask about extremes to try and tease that out. With that, I will hand it over to Michael Bryden so that he can present on what we heard and saw in round 2.
Okay, thanks, Danielle. Hopefully you can hear me. You can't see me. I guess I've been blocked out, but that's fine. So I'll just quickly go through this because these are just some preliminary numbers from the round 2 survey. And as Danielle just said, this is an iterative survey process. So the point of round 2 isn't to decide anything, it's really to seed round 3. So actually, if you go to the next slide, Danielle, I think we can make exactly that point, is that round 2 is an intermediate outcome. Round 3 will probably be what we might call the deciding round. That's when we're going to count up the results and say to the RD West planners, here's what the majority thinks. This is what the majority's preferences are. So the round three is, in a sense, more important than round two. But as you'll see, round two is where you get to have a bit of a dialogue with your neighbors. You get to express your preferences, but then also provide some reasons for those. So we may see that round three and round two look very similar. After all, people's preferences tend to be quite stable. And that's what we're asking you in this whole process. I mean, we were brought in by the RDOS to measure preferences to help inform what Danielle called a 20-25-year plan. So we're not really talking about this project or that project. We're talking about the community's long-term aspirations and preferences and priorities. And that's why these surveys are structured the way they are. So we won't see probably too many differences around these deeply held preferences, but we may see some changes, which is why we're going to do a round three when people have an opportunity to sort of give reasons and give rationales for their choices. Their neighbors may look at those and read them and go, yeah, I guess that wouldn't be so bad, or or maybe they'll double down on what they already believe. So that's why we're iterating on this. And the only other reason, and I just want to point this out as a bit of a warning, in a multi-round survey, there is a risk that people say, well, I've done the survey, or they get bored with it. That might happen, in which case we might see a drop off in participation. But that would be a mistake, I guess, if you have strong preferences, because like I say, we're only really counting the third round. So if you've done round two and then you say, well, I'm not going to participate in round three, there's some risk that you're going to be not counted ultimately. Okay, so Danielle, if you go to the next slide, I'll just quickly talk about this round two. If you hit it again, there we go. We get the whole thing. So basically, we set out about 700, almost 800 invitations. We got some people kind of sniff around, do responses. We got a lot of completed surveys, almost 500 completed surveys online, and a handful of paper surveys. And then we have what we're going to call consistent responses for about, say, 440 consistent responses that we can actually use. And if you're wondering about the demographics, it turns out we've analyzed the demographics a little bit: age, neighborhood, owner status, like, for example, whether the respondents are seasonal or actually live in Naramata. And we're not really seeing great differences between these subgroups. I've shown age here relative to census, and you see we're actually getting a pretty good cross section of ages. I've not shown under 19 because, of course, the province of British Columbia says you have to be 18 years old to have an opinion, a votable opinion, basically. So I mean, that kind of makes some sense here. We got very few people under 19 responding anyways, but in the major age categories, we're fairly close to the same demographic as Naramata, the same demographic profile. But like I said, it turns out that the preferences we're seeing aren't really determined or influenced by age. Okay, so just to reiterate what Danielle said on the next slide, the format of this survey is you were given a bunch of scenarios. So what we're using here is a market research methodology. Actually, before I go on, I should go back a little bit, because some people say, well, how come there's a drop off in the surveys? We're down to under 500. You sent out more than 700 invitations. I should point out that from a market research point of view, that's a very good response rate, both absolutely and relatively. What I mean by absolutely is we have, say, 440 data points now, which is a lot. That's a very good basis to sort of inform some judgments here, and we'll talk about that later. At the same time, even as a percentage, that's pretty good. I note that about 500 people participate in the election, the RDOS, or the provincial municipal elections. So we're close to that, and that was our goal. Maybe we'll see some uptick in round three. Okay, sorry, let's go back to scenarios. I'm not going to talk about the scenarios. I'm just going to remind you, for those who have done the surveys, that there's these 5 scenarios. And if during the question and answer there's interest in understanding where these scenarios came from, we can certainly talk about that. The point is we have a small number of scenarios that are designed in a certain way to elicit preferences. Okay, these are not alternatives. These are not projects. These aren't even really visions for Naramata 20 years out. What they are are just these cartoon scenarios that differ from each other in important ways, in terms of, say, preservation or taxation, or the imposition of rules, for example. And by choosing one or the other, you are then giving us information about what you prefer, what you like. So that's really the whole point here. Is my experience in local government is you don't want to send planners off to kind of guess what a community wants. At the same time, you don't want to have citizens going off to determine, which project or which zoning bylaw or which, setback restriction you should have. You should have a good division of labor. So what I mean by that is you as a community are telling us what your big picture preferences are. And this information that's going to be passed on to the planners, who are going to design a solution that is a set of policies that hopefully achieve your preferences. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide, this is just a little bit of in the machinery. If you've done the surveys, and I don't know if you've done market research surveys before, is there a lot of work? Okay, straight up, they are a lot of work, but they give us extremely good information. So what happened during the surveys is you were given, these two scenarios with a little picture, try to evoke a sense of what we're talking about when we talk about, say, housing focused village or vibrant village. They're slightly different, and you were just going to express which one you liked, hopefully without thinking about it too much. And that allows us behind the scenes then to generate a little matrix. And then the bottom line at the bottom of this slide is you give us a score. You basically say this is, without knowing it, you've given us your preferences over all the scenarios. Okay, and that turns out to be what we want, because we can then use that in various different ways to inform decisions. So a lot of people are saying, well, this is a complete waste of time. Well, not a lot of people. People I know are saying this is a complete waste of time. Everyone knows what we should be doing here. But this is why we go and measure, because we often find that things are a little different in reality than people assume. So if you go to the next slide here, this one was just to call this slide different strokes for different folks. The one on the left just basically is a bar chart that says what proportion of the respondents, for what portion was this the number one choice. So each scenario is someone's number one choice. In fact, some subgroup valued this, each of these scenarios more than every other scenario. So if you think there's some clunker scenarios in there that no one would like, it turns out not to be the case. And on the right-hand side, we see the opposite effect. Though I think you do see a very large bar for the welcome the world scenario. That was pretty much the unrestricted development kind of scenario. A lot of people rated that dead last, so that there's quite a bar, a long bar there. But the other bars correspond to pretty much there's someone who hated every scenario, and there's someone who loved every scenario. So that's important to know, and then that's one of the big outcomes from this kind of research, this kind of survey, is you get to see that not everyone in the community thinks maybe the way you do. Which is important, because this means for someone like Danielle and the planning staff at the RDOS, there's no easy solutions here. There's going to have to be compromises. There's going to have to be some give and take. And remember, what we're listing preferences on are really big issues like development, like commercial vibrancy, like property rights, and the freedom to do things. So we're going to get some good information from this. So in case you're wondering, if we go to the next slide, and it's a bit hard to see what's going on here, but what we do is we get a distribution for each scenario. So what I mean by distribution is, on the left, you have your low scores, and on the right you have your high scores, and then these little lines are the distribution of people. So if you look over on the left, you see there's kind of like this bell-shaped curve centered on -2. That means most people didn't like this scenario, and that was the welcome the world. If you look at the legend, that was the basic open everything up for development and to market forces. Though, of course, if you follow that line all the way over to the very right, you see this little bump. There's some people who are extremely supportive of that scenario. Okay, and the other 4 scenarios, then you get a little bit of a mix. What we see when I look at this is I see a lot of camel humps, or whatever has two humps, what we call a bimodal distribution, where you've got some people very strongly in favor and some people very strongly against. Okay. Now, I don't want you to stare at this graph too long because it's maybe not the best graph to look at. So the next one's a little bit simpler, but it's the exact same information. It's just some box plots. And think of a box plot is just a box where 50% of the data is. So now the axes are switched on their side. So near the bottom of the graph is, if there's a, if you look on the far right, there's a box on the bottom right. That suggests that most people didn't really like this scenario. Now, if you go one to the left, Vibrant Village, you see the box is quite large, meaning there's still quite a range of views, but at least the average, which is the little red triangle, is higher. Or the median 50% score is the line across it. But you don't really have to understand these. They're certainly available if you want to stare at them more. But basically what we're doing here is getting a score for each scenario, and keeping in mind that since this was pairwise comparisons, they're relative to each other. So, this is kind of, if you like, the gold standard of preference information, because we know sort of what people want. So what do we do with this information? Well, if you go to the next slide, what you're going to see coming in round 3 is this, where everything sort of comes together. So on one hand, next time you look at these short little scenario descriptions, you're going to see that they've been augmented with comments for and against, pro and con, from the community. And to the extent possible, RDOS Planning has used your own words to enumerate these pros and cons. So they've gone through all these comments that were written in round 2 and tried to paraphrase them into, let's face it, no one wants to read 68 pages of comments. So they've tried to sort of find the key points, and the key points in favor of this scenario and the key points against this scenario. And the idea is, of course, that you read these, you take a look at them. And like you say, they may change your preferences or they may harden your preferences. But we do encourage you to sort of take a look at them, because these are the points your neighbors are making in favor of what they want. And think of it as a kind of a debate where no one's yelling at each other, because it's moderated by the technology. And of course, it's anonymous. So, people, I think, have been pretty free to say what they want. At the same time, you'll also get a little bit of quantitative information. The little bar chart there on the right, not everyone likes bar charts, but it basically tells you which way the wind is blowing for each of these pairwise comparisons. So this is what you're going to see in round 3, and hopefully it'll make sense. I mean, you're still free to vote however you want. We're talking about your preferences. But at the same time, you'll see where the community was heading at the end of round 2 in terms of each one of these pairwise comparisons. Okay, and this actually, like I said, I'm not sure if you like to look at these kind of graphs, but when I look at this, I see something right away. I see, a very strong preference on the left-hand side. People love this one alternative, but there's a little bubble on the right. People are weakly in favor of the other. So these are very tricky things, and this is where there's going to be some need for compromise. Okay, but like I say, none of these, or like Danielle said, none of these scenarios, of course, are meant to be alternatives. What they're allowing us to do once the smoke clears is to sort of see where people's priorities are. And they're around the really big issues. They're around densification, they're around development, in Naramata's case on the hillside, they're around property rights, and they're around taxation, the cost of providing public infrastructure and services. Okay, and I guess I should say vibrancy as well. Where did these come from? We can talk about that later, but they came from your likes and dislikes in round 1. Okay, so that's all I have, Danielle, on that. I hope that was not too wordy, but like I say, we can come back and talk about any aspect of this whenever you like.
Great. Thank you, Michael. That was wonderful. And I had these slides, so I picked up exactly where you've left off here with, I just want to reiterate that this is exactly your words. This is what you'll see more or less on the survey. This isn't the final version. but the pros and cons that you'll see by each is what you've submitted into the survey. To show you an idea of that, we have every single comment online. You can see them. There's a link on the Regional Connections page. I have read every single one and mapped them together. And what you'll see there is each scenario is written, then it'll have a pro section and a con section. The bolded title is what I've written as a summary, just to make it clear what we're talking about. And then underneath is points in your words. Those are copy pasted from your comments and what you will see in the survey. So it is your neighbors and yourself making these points. I've only summarized it so it's easier to understand. And then if you're interested, the complete comments that are categorized under each are all in that report. It is 68 pages. It's not an easy read, but it is an interesting read. So my next few slides, I pulled out a few comments because I'm noticing some trends and I want to clarify some things that are rooting them in reality. I'm not arguing for or against your comments in any way. It just is a trigger for reminding me that not everybody knows planning as well as planners do. So I just wanted to provide some clarifications in advance of your questions. I certainly haven't captured everything that you're going to ask, so that will be up to you to bring up, but nonetheless, here are some clarifications. So we saw some people saying scenarios are nostalgic and unrealistic. I'm not a fan of how you've presented these options, etc. Which we've said it before, and I'll just say it one more time. These are not meant to be reality. These are extremes, and our reality will be some compromise in between these scenarios. So in the next round, don't worry about it being reality. Think about the essence of it. We also had quite a few comments about agricultural land and protecting agricultural land being very important. And we don't want it to rob Naramata of its charm. What you see here in the pink is our agricultural land reserve. And I just wanted to clarify that a lot of the agricultural land is already protected from development. That's very limited what you can do. The Agricultural Land Commission is in charge of that land and make sure that everything on that land fits with their regulations in addition to the RDOS's regulations. And the intent of that property is to farm and protect farming. So it's quite widespread. You see the village in the center, and then most things surrounding the village are in pink, which is agricultural land reserve. And then I've just captured on the left-hand side here, Falcon Ridge. There's a few ALR properties there. And on the right-hand side, the more northern part of Naramata by Indian Rock, there's quite a few agricultural properties there as well. The next slide speaks to the same thing, just another comment about making sure we protect our agricultural land and don't destroy the characteristics. And likewise, just another map to visualize it. Everything green here is designated agriculture in our current OCP, which means it is supposed to be for agriculture and it's protected from any big developments. And then the crosshatch area is what's in the agricultural land reserve. So not all of the land is in the reserve, but quite a lot of it is designated agriculture. Quite a lot of discussion in the comments about hillside developments and making sure that we don't make them ugly and make sure there's less clear cutting, stormwater drainage issues are taken care of. This is just to demonstrate the major subdivisions that we have going on. So what a lot of you I'm hearing from right now is about the clear cutting up the hill. That's the Vista subdivision where they're just doing their land works now and still in the subdivision application phase. Wanted to clarify that the Ministry of Transportation is in charge of and the deciding authority on subdivisions. They do consult with us as the RDOS, and we provide comments to make sure that they're in line with our OCP bylaw, our zoning bylaw, our servicing bylaws. But at the end of the day, it's up to the province to make the final calls on what those look like. And with all of these ones up on the hill, which are the ones I assume you're mostly talking about because they're the ones we're most familiar with, Kettlebridge, Outlook, Stonebrook, and Vista here in yellow, just above the KVR, they all had historic OCP designations in zoning that allowed them to do this. So they were all either low density residential or small holdings properties that have been in place for quite a long time. So it's not new that they were allowed to do this, it's just that it's finally played out. But most of what's developable here is now complete. So it doesn't maybe make up for it in some of your minds, but it is perhaps some solace that most of this development is now done. There's, of course, a lot of vacant lots still to be developed with new houses, but the lots are made. And then Kettleridge has 1, 2, 3 more lots that could be subdivided given their current zoning and OCP designation. And of course, this Vista subdivision here will become 41 lots once it's complete. Another comment about hillsides and what I've captured here in blue as compared to in yellow, which are the subdivisions that are current and existing, and Grace Estates is up here in North Naramata Road. Everything blue is privately held lands that are on the hillside. And this is it for Naramata. There are no more privately owned parcels past what you see here in blue. So you've got North Naramata here, 2 large parcels there. Of course, above Vista, there's a few parcels, and around the KVR near Grace Estates, there's a few more parcels. And finally, in Falcon Ridge, there's 2 more parcels. These are the only ones that are not currently under subdivision and that are privately held and not Crown land. So everything beyond this is Crown land and wouldn't have a subdivision application. And then many comments about controls and restrictions on what could happen. Every single one of these properties you see here in blue is zoned resource area and designated in the OCP as resource area. So the intent of those designations is that they should remain large parcels. The minimum parcel size is 20 hectares, and it should be used for perhaps a home or a secondary home, and then resource extraction or grazing or farming or home occupation, but nothing intense. Most of this land should remain as is. So unless those property owners apply for an OCP amendment and a rezoning, those parcels won't be subdividable. And that's something the OCP can make policies on one way or the other. And then this is just zoomed out to help you see how most of the land in Electoral Area E is protected as Crown land. I've highlighted in green here the KVR, and most land east of the KVR is Crown land. These big parcels in here are Crown. You see the 2 here that are privately held, but everything around is Crown. And I have included or excluded rather, a couple of the large parcels here because they are agricultural. Likewise, in North Naramata, it's agricultural land, so I didn't include those large parcels as blue because they're protected as agricultural land. And still going on the same point, quite a lot of the concerns with hillside development is around beauty and also around environmental protection. We have cases where the land was cleared and then drainage was not great and floods happened. We have very sensitive ecosystems in the area, in all of South Okanagan, but particularly in Electoral Area E, that need to be protected. So this is our current environmentally sensitive development permit area map and the important ecosystem area. And now the pink is where we require development permits, and it quite closely echoes what you just saw in that previous map, where the large parcels that are privately held on the hillsides are environmentally sensitive. So in addition to being resource area and not zoned for a large housing subdivision, they are also protected and would need a biologist to go on site for any development, even just building a house. And I switch gears a little bit here. Just the other theme I saw in the comments, quite a lot of were comments both ways about the village, liking it the way it is, and also thinking that it does need more residential and more commercial. This is existing zoning, not the OCP designations, and everything that is outlined in a dark blue box are vacant properties. They might be used for agriculture or some other purpose, but they don't have a home on them where they could. So people who are saying, oh, we already have enough housing in the village, it may be the case, but the village is not completely developed as much as it could be because there are still vacant properties that could have a home on them. I also, the comment here is about Naramata Center having a large piece of land that could be used for something else. And everything you see in the dark teal here is Naramata Center land. So a lot of it is vacant because it's many parcels and they're only using some of them. And some of it could be redesignated in the OCP or rezoned at a later time for further development. The last thing I wanted to point out here is everything in purple is the Naramata Village Center designation and zoning. So everything there could be more dense. So the vacant packing house location with the wine vault on it that I have seen some comments about in this is something that is allowed in the designation and the zoning. So it can go up to 3 stories, 12 meters high, and have a mix of commercial and residential. So everything in this is Robson and the inn. So everything in this area could go more dense already in the way that it is designated. And that's something that through the OCP process, perhaps some properties, there's some residential in this, could be taken out, or perhaps more of Robson could be put in. It's really up to the community. It's a good comment. The village should remain a village. I think pretty much no matter which way the OCP goes, it will remain a village. The space is finite. There's only so much you can do. And there's other concerns like servicing and water, etc. And I wanted to point out one more thing here because likewise with, on the previous slide, there being vacant properties, there's also properties that are actually more than one lot. So there is development potential in Naramata as it's currently designated in the OCP and zoned. A lot of these orange outlined lots have 1, 2, 3, 4 or 1, 2 little lots inside of what's sitting on somebody's total parcel. So those are historic lots back in, I believe, 1904 when Naramata was first surveyed. The town center was very little city-style lots, and some of those have been consolidated because people wanted bigger properties with bigger houses, and some of them have not. So those properties could be split out and sold separately and developed separately since they are separate parcels. This is another comment. We're seeing a lot of people talking about the charm and tranquility of the village and keeping it the way it is, and also making sure that year-round residents are taken care of. Which are great points, and again, just reiterating the status quo of what we have going on. This is a very stylized map. It is based on the ones you've been seeing, but I've simplified it just into colors here to give you an idea. So right near the lake in the village center, we have the properties that are zoned and designated for very dense up to, not very dense, it's really medium, but up to 3 stories and a mix of commercial and residential. Then surrounding that, we have land that is not in the agricultural land reserve and could be considered the village growth area. That's something that will be determined and finalized through this OCP process. The area could be smaller than that. It could be none of that. It could only be the purple, but that's all the land that has the potential to go there. The pink surrounding that is the agricultural land reserve and the agricultural properties that will stay agricultural. That's not going to change. And then the light blue is everything that is residential or small holdings outside of the agricultural land reserve. So you have the subdivisions up around the KVR and a few larger holdings properties in North Naramata, including Grace Estates. The gray out areas are those large resource area properties that are not designated or zoned for a small subdivision, but are still privately held lands that something could happen with, like putting a house on. And then everything around that is crown land. I didn't include Falcon Ridge here or North Naramata because it's fairly all agricultural and residential already. And I believe this is my last train of thought before I open it up for questions. The last theme I'm seeing quite a lot of comments on is vacation rentals. So a lot of people are saying we're not okay with Naramata being overrun with vacation rentals. We want people who are living here full time. And this is just some stats on what we're seeing right now with vacation rentals. We've had 77 applications for vacation rentals since 2014 when the policy came into place. And of that, 2/3 were in Electoral Area E. So you are the hotspot for where vacation rentals are going. This map, I'm not sure that you can see it well because they're such light colors, but it shows where all of the in green active TUP parcels are. So those have a temporary use permit for vacation rental, ones that used to have one, but they let it lapse, and ones that have applied but don't have it yet. So there are some in the village, about 8 there, some in the surrounding agricultural areas, and then a couple in Upper Quebec and the subdivisions there. Again, another comment about too many vacation rentals being issued and not having controls on them. Just wanted to go over the current policy and process that people have to go through. Right now, the process is to apply for a vacation rental TUP, which is a temporary use permit. And when they apply, they must meet all the requirements. So they have to have their septic inspected and make sure that it has enough room for vacation rental, which is more of a commercial use. They have to make sure that they have enough parking for everybody. They have to have to tell us how many bedrooms they intend to rent, and they only get a maximum of 2 people per bedroom to a maximum of 10 people on the property. They have to give us a property manager name and number, and that also gets distributed to the neighbors within 100 meters so that they can be reached and any problems can be reported to the property manager, in addition to the bylaw enforcement number for noise. Then once they've applied, we go to a public information meeting, and all of the neighbors within 100 meters get a mail invitation to come to that meeting and ask questions or voice their opinion. They can submit written feedback, and that written feedback goes into the application package that we show to the board. So they do get to see any complaints or thoughts against allowing those vacation rentals. Then typically on the same day, we bring the application to the Advisory Planning Commission, which is a group of community members who volunteered their time to sit on this formal commission and think about how applications are affecting your community, and they will make a formal recommendation to the Regional District Board whether to approve or deny the application in their opinion. And then finally, the Regional District Board determines how the application will move forward, either approval or denial. And last thought of the vacation rentals here is and just housing in general, is about having vacant homes in Naramata. And that's something that is beyond the control of the regional district, but definitely is a concern to your community, where vacation rental owners and even vacation home owners, there's no restriction on who can own a property. So when a property goes for sale, anybody can buy it. And in a market like this, it goes to the highest bidder, which may be somebody who's looking for a second or third home. So what we have in your community right now is that 74%, almost 3/4 of the vacation rental applications we're seeing are people who have a primary address out of town. So that they don't live there as their principal residence. They may live there, they may use their house, but it's not listed as a principal residence. And then almost half, 42% of the parcels in Electoral Area E that are private parcels, I've excluded crown parcels, are owned by an owner who has a primary address out of town. So again, that doesn't mean they don't use their home themselves, but it doesn't mean that it's not their principal residence as they report it. So it is quite prolific in your community. Finally, I just wanted to end, there's a lot of comments, 68 pages of comments that are quite serious, and these two made me smile, so I thought I'd share them with you. I'm not picking on these people. I love these people. One says, I've been in Naramata for 60 years and I'd like to go back to the 70s. And sometimes I wish I had a time machine for you. And the other said, I'm 75 years old, so please wait until I'm dead. She underlined it to carry on with your ambitious plans, which I appreciate. Change is scary, so sometimes it would be easier for it to just go away. With that, I will give you next couple steps for things that you can be involved in, which is Survey 3 is going to launch in early April. Most likely that means next week. We have another public information meeting just like this on April 20th. The purpose of that one is to answer any questions or comments during Survey 3 while it's still open. So if you need any help with that. And then we have an open house at the Earth Day in the Village on April 23rd. So that'll be a fun event with all of you, and I hope to see you there. Survey 3 will close about a month after it opens, and then we'll go away with the community advisory group and work on some of the draft policies before we come back out to the community in the summer for some engagement on that. So it is now time for you to ask your questions. Just in case you don't get your question answered tonight or you don't feel comfortable asking it out loud, you can email me, you can call me, and best of all, you can use that question box on the RDS Regional Connections page because I will be able to answer your question publicly and everyone then can see the answer if they have the same question. I will stop sharing this, and I believe Shannon will help me guide me through who's got their hands up first. So if you do have a question, the bottom right hand side, there's a little face with 3 lines. That's the participant box. If you have a question, you turn that on and click by your name. There should be a little hand to click to raise your hand. And if you're on the phone, you use *3. This is set up as a webinar, so the only way for you to show us that you want to speak is by raising your hand or pressing *3 on your phone because you don't have control over your mute button, and then we will be able to unmute you.
It looks like we've got a question from Norbert. I will go ahead and unmute you. Oops.
Oh, okay, Norbert, you are unmuted.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. Lots of interesting material. Don't quite know how to put this, but my question is around the public input to, and I'm thinking specifically of the short-term rentals issue. But the way public input actually works, because my understanding is that planning, so anybody in planning in the RDOS, when they make a recommendation on an application, specifically do not consider public input. So that was surprising to me. So what I was told is they will collect the public input they will pass it on to the board, and that's essentially it. They don't pass it on to the APC. They would provide kind of a summary if somebody from the APC chose to ask. But essentially, any feedback really just goes to the board. And even the public information meeting, which is there for an application, again, my understanding is no minutes are taken. Nobody from the APC, for example, must attend. They may. And again, really the only sort of way for feedback from the public information meeting to really get anywhere is essentially, I think, through the area director hearing what's said and choosing how to react to that. So it seems a little weak to me. So am I missing something? I mean, is public input considered in a, in more ways than I'm aware of? And I guess another, so general question and a specific question, why wouldn't planners consider public input when they make a recommendation?
Okay, thank you. I will take a stab at your question, and if Shannon wants to jump in, she can also. I do, as a planner, consider public input, especially with something this big, where this is not about me being a planner expert, this is about your community moving forward. With more specific applications that would be going to the Advisory Planning Commission, things like TUP, a temporary use permit for a vacation rental. The planning evaluation is mostly based on facts. So community input is a fact. The community thinks X, but in addition to that, our policy says X, and also a planning expertise would recommend for or against such an application. Then it is all included in the package to the board, and the area director does attend those public information meetings. We have heard feedback that public information meetings, they seem a little not complete by having no minutes and being informal. So we are recording them. This is being recorded. Others are being recorded. Often we don't have anybody who comes, or if people come, they don't have comments. So in those cases, there's nothing to share forward. But we are trying to make sure that we share what happens at those meetings better. Shannon, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. I mean, with regards to public information meetings, they're just really a good opportunity that it's a benefit for staff, for applicants, as well as the members of the public to come together in a space to actually have a discussion and answer some questions about the proposals that we have at hand. Obviously, in this case, it's a little bit different as this is a larger scale project, but it's really a forum to clarify some questions and concerns that the public has in regards to projects that we have going on and applications going on. And it also allows the applicants to hear what's going on in the community and also, give them potential opportunity to react. And they may choose to revise their proposals after that, or, just try to find ways to make it work for the community. So yeah, aside from that, I'll pass it back to you, Danielle.
Thanks. Does that answer your question, Norbert?
Yes and no. I mean, I still think in the end, it seems the public input consideration seems rather weak. So again, I'm not talking about OCP, and perhaps this isn't the right venue, but there aren't a lot of venues for me to raise these kinds of questions. So, a public information meeting on a TUP application happens immediately before the APC. So there really doesn't seem to be a chance for anybody from planning who might hear an opposing point of view to change the recommendation, which has already been arrived at. That then goes to the APC. They haven't necessarily heard anything that happened at the public information meeting. So if you have an opposing point of view, how do you get that in front of people? You can't talk at the APC, or at least it's very difficult to be able to speak to the APC. I gather there is some allowance if you can get enough of the members of the APC to agree to listen to you, but it seems weak. Like I say, planners and I spoke with the planner on a particular application, and I was told, you know what, your input is not one of the criteria we look at. So Yeah, it's weak. Public input is taken only maybe at the very last, at the board level. I'm a little skeptical about how many directors from other than the area affected actually would read feedback out about a specific thing like this. So yeah, it's like if I, for example, can't member of the public speak to the APC if they have an opposing point of view and present their rationale.
Well, a lot of your points are quite fair. That I always say public engagement could be better. There's limited ways of reaching people, and a lot of what we do with public information meetings have been going the same way for decades. So that doesn't mean it's necessarily the best, but it is the tool we have to use. Every planner might be a little bit different. If I hear something negative at a public information meeting, I sometimes write it into the report if it is significant. And we always encourage people to put it in writing, because once it's in writing, we can put that on the agenda. It bumps the application into a more serious place on the agenda to say, look, the community is not in support of this. The board should deliberate and think about if it's actually something beneficial to the community or not. In regards to the APC, the committee works that way. It's formed from people who are board appointed to represent the community. So they're there representing the community opinion. And that's why we also have the public information meeting. I see some other hands, so I'm going to move on. But
all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I saw Maureen Ketchison next. I will unmute you. Maureen, go ahead.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I'm just wondering, you talk about community, and this is specifically with regard to the process that goes forward to approving vacation rentals. If all the neighbors are against a particular application moving forward, how is that considered? I sort of like what Norbert was saying, but it seems to me that the culture of now the neighborhood versus community, right? Now I'm talking neighborhoods. You've got these big houses with absentee owners that are now using them as mini hotels to house people, and people around them, their neighbors, didn't sign up to live next to a mini hotel with everything that goes on, or a resort-like situation. And I just want to strongly state that I think Norbert hit the nail on the head, is that we need, our voices as neighbors need to be heard a little better than perhaps they have to date.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I also will flip that back and encourage you to submit feedback and come to the public information meetings, because I have had many where nobody has showed up and nobody's submitted any feedback. So then I only have the APC's feedback to go on. I see Director Kazakovich has something to add. Go ahead.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Maureen and Norbert. Some really good points. And Danielle did mention our public information meetings to date have really often had nobody attend. So we sit and wait for a while, or people attend and say nothing. So if people aren't in support of a vacation rental, either in their neighborhood or even in the community in whole, we need you to speak up when there is an application. And in particular, in writing is the best way, because that hits all 19 directors at the board table. And if nobody says anything at a public information meeting or attends and nobody writes in, then it often goes on what we call a consent agenda. That means that the applicant has met all the criteria, nobody was against it, so it's going to move forward and they're going to get their trial TUP, which is generally 6 months to prove that they're able to do a good job and not impact the neighbors. If they do, then at renewal time, they may very well not get renewed. But if, as Danielle said, if there's letters that come in against that, you're not going to see an application be under what we call consent. That it means that there are issues with it, there are concerns, and the board of directors is to address that on its own, on the merits of that application, and talk about the concerns. So I strongly encourage everybody, if you don't want one near you or in the community, I need you to write in. And I know we've received several on an upcoming one, probably 4 or 5. So that's really important. That's probably the most I've ever seen come in on any TUP application. So I guess what I'm saying is keep up the good work. If you don't want something, you need to let us know in writing. So thank you. Thanks, Danielle. Great presentation so far. Thank you.
Okay, can I just, it's Maureen again, just thank you, Carla, for that clarification, because we were, as neighbors, everyone has written in, and we were hoping that that just didn't fall into some dark hole of bureaucracy, that the issues that are raised about the objections for a particular top application are considered and aren't just lost in the process, as Norbert mentioned.
Yes, yeah, that is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe we had Skulk next. Oh, I lost you. Maybe Shannon has you.
All right, Skulk, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Danielle,
Yes,
can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Ah, great. First of all, just in comment, mostly about Norbert's comments. The new guidelines for the APC explicitly and expressly prevents the public from speaking to the APC. I understand that, otherwise the APC will degenerate into a mini public hearing. So yes, I also feel that the public hearings, there's no record, there's no swaying of ideas or anything. It's meant to be a one-way to feed the public with information, not to have any feedback. However, I would like to note that in the previous APC meeting for Area E, that the chairman mentioned the administration report consistently say, we don't like this, we don't do it this way, we don't like that, we don't normally allow this. By the way, please approve. So I tend to agree with Norbert that all the feedback from the public or even common sense, that's not fairly reflected in the administrative reports. It's a general comment. I stand to be corrected, but I've seen that in practice. So I am not convinced that the public information or feedback is actually any input into what the board is being presented with, and the board will see the APC, they will see the administrative report, and I bet you if you've seen the board reports with 400, 500 pages, nobody will read that. I'm not convinced that the board will actually take decisions based on what the public feedback is. Thank you.
Thanks, Skulk. I tend to agree. We definitely can do public engagement better. One clarification point on the administrative report is that it is written in a format that's standard, that shows all sides. So it usually has reasons that we would support an application and reasons we would not support an application, and as part of that, what the administrative recommendation is. And they tend to be very site specific. So the zoning bylaws that are usually what's being amended or varied is very specific in its rules, and we have that application because somebody's wanting to do something different than the rules. So we always reiterate what those rules are, why they're in place, and then give specific context to what's happening in this particular application and whether we think it's reasonable or not. And then the APC, the Advisory Planning Commission, and the Regional District Board are both able to make their own decision based on all of the facts because we've put them there. As far as public engagement goes, it does go on the agenda. They are very, very long, so I agreed. I'm sure not everybody is reading them, but they will see that there is representations, which is what we refer to them as, which are letters for or against the application. And usually we put that into our summary as well to say the community does have feedback on this.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Are you still there, Daniel?
I'm still here.
Okay, well, and I forgot to say thank you to Michael Bryden. That presentation was actually very informative. I'm a data junkie somewhat, and I can read into it, and I was somewhat surprised. I would actually love to delve into the details, but kudos to the job there.
Thank you. Yeah, I will be posting that presentation online so you can see the graphs again. It should be up tomorrow. So it'll be in that little document side on the Regional Connections page. Excellent. Thank you, Skulk. Doug and Brenda I have next. You should be unmuted. Go ahead.
Danielle, are you a planner for this area only or for RDOS as a whole?
For RDOS as a whole.
Okay. You live in this area?
I'm in Penticton.
Okay.
So close.
If a homeowner lives in a property full-time or it's his principal residence, does he need to apply to rent out part of that house as a Airbnb or VRBO? Or does he, because he lives there as principal, is he able to just rent that out without doing an application?
So it depends on where in the house. If it's a room in your house and you're also in your house and you provide them breakfast, that could be considered a bed and breakfast, which does not require an application. But if it is a separate suite in your house or a separate dwelling on your property, at this point, the rule is still that you need to apply for a temporary use permit. I know there's thoughts about changing that, and people are asking to say, you know, if people live on the property, great. If they don't live on their property, annoying, and we don't like it because they're going to be noisy and disrespectful. But that has yet to be determined through some pending future vacation rental review.
So if the owner lives upstairs and the suite is downstairs, he needs to apply?
Yes, you would need a temporary use permit for a vacation rental.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that is all the hands I see right now, unless you see any, Shannon.
Nope, I don't see the hands.
Great. Michael said thanks back to Skulk in the corner if you didn't see that. So appreciate it. Me too. I'm also a data junkie. I love looking at the stats. I could have hung out on that slide all night. Okay, James Young, I will unmute you here. Go ahead, please. James, are you there?
Trying to be.
Yes, we hear you now.
Okay. There's some talk about sewers happening in the village and where they're going to go. So when are we getting that input so that we can be informed on that? Because that's going to impact how the development happens and how we appreciate it.
Absolutely. So that is unfolding right now through what's called a liquid waste management plan. I believe they're doing a 3-phase report for that, and they have a draft of phase 1 now, which is supposed to be, we had an initial community engagement, got some feedback, we did some kind of scoping and ideas of what might be possible in the village, and they're working on that now. I have seen it and commented on it as the planner who's doing this OCP, and I had a lot of concerns. So it is not in a phase where it's ready to move forward publicly. I just think it needs some updated calculations. It's not accurate. But that said, it should be soon. And they have another page for where they're at in their consultation process. As well, tomorrow our community advisory group has a deep dive meeting about water and sewer, and that will be recorded and released online. So by probably Thursday or Friday, there will be a video on that on our regional connections page from the team that's actually working on it.
Yeah, because without the sewers, development can't really change, because we're already the largest community on the lake without sewers, so it's not good.
Definitely, and a lot of the lakefront properties have issues with their septic systems in the lake.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great. I'm not seeing any further hands here, so this is your chance if you were thinking of a question to go ahead and put your hand up before we end this meeting. If you do come up with something afterwards, please send it to me or send it on the Regional Connections page. I'll be able to answer it there. And Michael has something to add. Please go ahead.
No, I just want to comment quickly on that last question about sewer, because it's actually, if you looked at the surveys, for example, it doesn't say anything about sewer, which would be obviously a central issue in a place like Naramata. And, I guess the point I want to make, and it kind of gets into a little bit the scenarios in the round three is very few people probably wake up in the morning and say, I want sewer. Just for sewer's sake. They want sewer as a means to achieve something else, like density or environmental goals or whatever. So what we're trying to get at, and I would argue the discussion of what are we trying to get at should come before you have a discussion about sewer, because obviously sewer, like everything we're seeing in these surveys, has a trade-off. Most obviously, it's extremely expensive. On the other hand, it enables certain kinds of, I would say behaviors. It enables densification, in terms of carriage houses, in-law suites and things like that, which probably aren't 100% legitimate right now, given the septic. So what we want to do is find out, does the community in aggregate want to stop growing tomorrow? I mean, as a preference, or do they want to grow like crazy or whatever? And I think our goal is to answer those questions in a very general way before delving into getting, why would you want sewer? You want sewer to achieve something else. But let's talk about that something else first, and at least get a consensus or a rough sense of how people are feeling on that. So just my 2 cents.
Yes, absolutely agreed. It's where we're headed. Great. Okay, I'll give you one last chance if there's anything else, burning questions or comments coming up. Not seeing any. Michael or Director Kazakovich, do you have any final thoughts before we close this meeting? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. Thank you, everybody, for joining in tonight. And I really enjoyed this presentation. Really well done, Danielle and Michael. It was very informative. I think everyone probably learned some things they didn't know. And, I know vacation rental permits are a really hot topic. That's very clear. And over the many years, frankly, we haven't had people attend meetings or write into the board, but now we're seeing a change, and that's how you can make a change. So if you are opposed to something, please write in, and it will be seen by the board. And if there are 3, 4, 10 letters against something, I will be pointing that out to the board so that it's not missed. Sometimes our agendas are 500 pages. We've had 800 pages. I do read them. I read the representations, not only from Area E, I do for all electoral areas, because there's 9 electoral area directors, and our role is to make the decisions for the whole region. So there is no vote of one. So myself and 8 other area directors make rural decisions. So I take it very seriously what letters come in for their areas, and I do read them all. So I just want everyone to take that opportunity to write in when there's something you don't like, and also to write in if there's something you do like. Make sure you voice your support if there's something you like, whether it's a TUP or any other issue. So I'm pleased to see people doing that now and receiving those letters. So thank you, and continue to do so. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you. And Michael, is that a new hand or an old hand?
Oh, good eye, it's an old hand.
Okay, excellent. No one else popped their hand up during that, so I will close this meeting. Thank you very much for attending and participating and listening. It's important to this process. There will be lots more chances before we get to a final OCP document. So enjoy the rest of your night, and thank you very much.